What's up, Dolphins fans? It's been a busy day in Miami Gardens. The front office has been working overtime. Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel made three major roster moves today, and there's plenty to unpack. Injuries continue to shake up the depth chart, and the team's been forced to make adjustments both on the practice squad and the active roster. But before we dive deep into what's going on, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. And of course, hit that bell icon so you never miss an update on your Miami Dolphins. All right, let's get into it. Roster move number 1. The Dolphins have officially placed cornerback Cornell Armstrong on injured reserve. That means he'll miss at least the next 4 games, weeks 6 through 9. And honestly, this secondary just can't catch a break. The cornerback room has been absolutely decimated since training camp. It started back in July when Kader Kohou went down with a season-ending injury. Then Storm Duck missed 4 straight games, and Jason Marshall Jr. was added to the IR as well. It's been one setback after another. Armstrong had recently stepped into a starting role, logging 63 snaps over the last 3 weeks. Unfortunately, his performance hasn't exactly inspired confidence, allowing 3 catches on 4 targets, a QB rating of 143.8 when targeted, and even giving up a touchdown. Still, over the past 2 games, he was lining up as the team's starting nickel corner, which says a lot about the Dolphins' current situation. It's crazy to think that Armstrong was a starter for this defense, but that's the reality in Miami right now. A revolving door of injuries and constant lineup changes. In Week 5 against the Panthers, Cornell Armstrong logged 23 snaps before leaving the game early with that injury. If he hadn't gone down, he likely would have finished with over 40 snaps, continuing as Miami's starting nickel corner. But here's the problem. This Dolphins secondary just keeps shrinking. Every week, another cornerback drops, and the room looks thinner and thinner. Earlier this season, we could actually display the cornerback depth chart with 3 or 4 names. Now, you'd be lucky to fill 2 spots. At the moment, Miami has just 5 corners on the active roster. Rasul Douglas and Jack Jones are your clear starters. Then you've got Juju Brents, who the team picked up after the Colts waived him, Ethan Bonner, and Storm Duck, who's still sidelined with injury. And here's the issue. None of these guys are true nickel corners. So the big question is, what's the plan now? Well, it's starting to become clear. With Armstrong landing on injured reserve, the Dolphins had an open spot on the 53-man roster, and they used it to bring back a familiar face, safety Jordan Colbert. Colbert, an undrafted free agent out of Rhode Island, has been part of this organization since 2024. He spent that entire season on Miami's practice squad, made the initial 53-man roster in August 2025, but was waived shortly after to make room for the Rasul Douglas signing. Now he's back, promoted from the practice squad to the active roster once again. It's a smart depth move for Miami, adding someone who already knows the system and can step in if needed. Before we move forward, let's give a warm welcome back to Jordan Colbert. Drop his jersey number, 43, down in the comments to show him some love, Dolphins fans. The man is back in aqua and orange. Now, let's take a look at what Colbert has done so far. During the 2025 preseason, he saw plenty of action, 97 total snaps, racking up 9 tackles and 1 tackle for loss. He did miss a few tackles along the way, posting a 16.7% missed tackle rate, which shows he's still developing, but Miami clearly sees something in him. Here's what makes this move interesting. Colbert isn't just some random depth piece. The Dolphins have invested 2 full seasons in him, keeping him on the practice squad, then on the initial 53-man roster, before briefly waiving him during roster cutdowns. That tells you this coaching staff believes in his potential. If they didn't, he would have been gone a long time ago. Now, you might be wondering, if Cornell Armstrong was a nickel corner, why replace him with a safety like Colbert? Shouldn't Miami have added another corner instead? That's a fair question. But here's the thing. In the preseason, Colbert played only 8 snaps in the slot. Most of his reps came at free safety or in the box, showing that he's more of a flexible safety than a true cornerback. Statistically, his preseason coverage numbers weren't great. 3 receptions on 3 targets, 1 touchdown allowed, and a 134.0 passer rating when targeted. Still, his role isn't about locking down receivers in man coverage. It's about adding depth, experience, and versatility to a defensive unit that's running thin due to injuries. Miami's hoping that familiarity with the system and his ability to play multiple roles can give this defense a little breathing room heading into the next stretch of the season. So yeah, it's clear, Jordan Colbert isn't coming in to replace Cornell Armstrong directly, and that's exactly what makes this move so interesting. Am I upset about Miami bringing Colbert back to the active roster? Not at all. But if we're being real, I probably would have preferred to see the Dolphins sign a proven nickel corner, someone with actual experience playing inside coverage. This team desperately needs depth at that spot. Still, the decision to elevate Colbert shows what the Dolphins coaching staff values right now: familiarity, flexibility, and reliability. They trust him to step in and contribute when needed, even if it's not in a traditional cornerback role. Now here's the wild part. After adding Colbert, the safety room is absolutely stacked. 6 players deep. 6 safeties on one roster. That's not something you see often in the NFL. It's unusual, but it might tell us something about how this defense plans to adapt. Maybe we're about to see more 3 safety looks or creative packages from Vic Fangio's defense to make up for the thin cornerback depth. Either way, this is one of those subtle roster shifts that could have a big impact in the coming weeks. 6 safeties. That number alone is wild. Absolutely astronomical for any NFL roster. Most teams carry 4, maybe 5 at most, but Miami is rolling with 6. Right now, you've got Elijah Campbell, Dante Trader Jr., Ifeatu Melifonwu, and now Jordan Colbert backing up the starting duo of Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ashton Davis, who've held down the back end for the past few weeks. And remember earlier when I hinted that the Dolphins' plan to replace Cornell Armstrong was already obvious? Well, here it is. Since the team doesn't have a true nickel corner on the roster, the solution is pretty straightforward. They're going to use a safety rotation to fill that role. Expect to see Miami running packages with 2 corners on the outside and 3 safeties on the field at the same time. It actually makes a lot of sense. Minkah Fitzpatrick has played in the slot before, both with the Steelers and during his first stint with the Dolphins. Ifeatu Melifonwu also has experience covering inside. Back when he was in Detroit, he was more of a coverage safety than a run stopper. So if you ask me how this secondary shapes up heading into Week 6, I'd say it looks something like this. Rasul Douglas and Jack Jones on the boundaries, with Minkah Fitzpatrick, Ashton Davis, Melifonwu, or even Dante Trader Jr. rotating through the slot and deep safety spots. That's the most logical setup, flexible, matchup-based, and creative enough to survive the injury storm. And speaking of roster moves, the Dolphins did add another cornerback, though not to the active roster. A familiar face, Kendall Sheffield, has been re-signed to the practice squad. You might remember him from this year's preseason, when he spent time in Miami's defensive system. It's a depth move, but one that could turn into something more if injuries keep stacking up. Kendall Sheffield was part of Miami's initial roster cuts back in August, just a day or two before the official 53-man deadline. And honestly, his story is pretty fascinating. At one point, Sheffield was actually listed as the #1 cornerback on the early depth chart. He didn't get much preseason action, logging just 32 snaps before suffering an injury in the second game. That setback sidelined him for a couple of weeks and very likely cost him his roster spot. But before the injury, Sheffield quietly put together some solid tape. In those first 2 preseason games, against the Lions and the Bears, he allowed just 1 reception on 1 target for 4 yards, posting a QB rating of 83.3 when targeted. Small sample size, sure, but the effort and technique were there. If you go back to Miami's initial preseason depth chart, the projected starting corners were Mike Hilton, Kendall Sheffield, and Storm Duck in the nickel. Maybe that was just preseason smoke. Maybe it was legit. But either way, Sheffield was clearly in the mix for a serious role before the injury hit. Now, with him back on the practice squad, this move says it all. Miami's cornerback room is still dangerously thin. Injuries have ripped through this secondary all year, and the Dolphins are searching for anyone who can bring depth and familiarity to the system. Whether Sheffield eventually earns his way back onto the active roster remains to be seen, but one thing's certain. The Dolphins desperately need bodies in that secondary if they want to survive the grind of this season. The Miami Dolphins are down to just 5 healthy cornerbacks, and even that's a stretch, because Storm Duck still isn't fully recovered from that ankle injury. And let me be real for a second. This situation is frustrating. What happened today with Mike McDaniel and the coaching staff is nothing short of confusing. At the Wednesday press conference, McDaniel told reporters that Storm Duck wasn't ready to practice yet. All right, fine. Makes sense, he's been out since week 1. But then, just a few hours later, guess who shows up at practice? Yep, Storm Duck. So what are we doing here? How do you tell the media a player isn't ready, and then he's literally out there practicing the same afternoon? That's not just miscommunication. It's bad roster management, plain and simple. And here's the real kicker. If Storm Duck ends up missing this week's game against the Chargers, that'll be his 5th straight missed game. At that point, he should have been placed on injured reserve weeks ago. Keeping him on the active roster this long has basically wasted a roster spot. And when your secondary is already this thin, that's unacceptable. I get that the team wanted to save an IR return designation and hoped he'd be back sooner, but now it's been over a month. That kind of decision-making hurts the depth of this football team, especially when every active spot matters. It's frustrating, it's sloppy, and it's something this coaching staff needs to clean up fast. That's going to wrap things up for today's show, Dolphins fans. We'll be back tomorrow with more updates, reactions, and in-depth breakdowns from around the league. And hey, if you're still watching and haven't subscribed yet, clearly you're enjoying the content. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, like the video, and join the community of passionate Dolphins fans who live and breathe this team every week.